Good evening and welcome to Tobago Connect. Today it's my joy and my pleasure to have with me in studio. And this is the topic today, sargassum, you call it seaweed, and the coast of Tobago. And we're going to be talking about all the areas that you can think of about what is this sargassum problem? How did it start? What's the impact on tourism, agriculture, fishing, transport? We're going to be talking about some of the industries that have come out from it. And so today on Tobago Connect, I have with me Howard Maria Robin, who is the climate change coastal officer with the Tobago House of Assembly. And we're going to be talking with him on the program today. All right, today I'm talking with Howard Robin, climate, just remind me that again.
Climate change specialist.
Yes, climate change specialist. Howard Robin is working with the Tobago House of Assembly. We're going to be talking with him. Today our topic is sargassum and the coast around Tobago, but I'm sure we'll talk even beyond that because sargassum is not only a local and a national problem, it's also a regional problem and even global in some areas. So again, Howard, I want to welcome you to the program, Tobago Connect, and it's a joy to have you here with us today.
Yeah, I want to say a special thanks to you for your invitation, and I hope that our discussions will give the Tobago public and people that view the program an opportunity to understand more about sargassum, how it impacts the Tobago and the wider Caribbean region, and also what can be done about it.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot there. Now, I mean, apart from just basic layman's understanding and reading on it, I mean, we all know it's an algae and we know it forms masses and all that in the water. But tell us plainly, what is this whole story on sargassum as we see it? We say seaweed, you know, people call it all kinds of names, but give us a kind of background as to how this became a problem.
Oh, okay, well, seaweed, sargassum, basically the same thing. It's nothing new to the Caribbean. It has always beached on the Caribbean shores, but in much smaller quantities than we have it now. The sargassum seaweed that we generally see here, originally the source of that sargassum used to be the Sargasso Sea. That is an area in the North Atlantic where you have a number of currents that form a circular region called the Sargasso Sea, where the sargassum actually blooms. In that location, it is a habitat, it's an ecosystem which provides safety for a lot of marine creatures. It provides food, it's a nursery. So in that location, it has always been there and it's functional. However, what we have seen recently is that the source of the golden tides, the extensive amount of sargassum that we are seeing, is not that location. Actually, a location in the southern part of the Atlantic, where you have another set of currents forming a gyre, and the sargassum bloom is there. And based on the strength or weakness of these currents, you have them coming up the Caribbean and actually affecting the island of the Caribbean, but not just in the Caribbean. You have areas along the west coast of Africa, areas on the east coast of South America, as well as in North America and Central America. So it's not just the Caribbean alone, it's the entire Atlantic basin basically is affected by the sargassum issue.
So, I mean, what has caused it to now get into this position where there's an excess amount? You did say this is nothing new, it used to happen in smaller quantities, But what has caused this? Is it climate change? Is it what's happening here?
Okay, so as I was indicated previously, when it comes to the Sargassum in the Sargasso Sea, that is not really the major cause of concern in terms of what is affecting the Caribbean. It's still a source, but not the most important part. The source that we are seeing now that is impacting is further down south. And a lot of it is attributed to things that are taking place as a result of human activities. So, for example, we have in the Atlantic Ocean, because of actions such as agriculture, mining, deforestation, you have an extensive amount of sediments and nutrients being pumped into these oceans. When you combine that with the increasing global temperature, when you combine that with the changes in the currents and the climatic patterns that we are normally seeing, all these things provoked by climate change, what we have is a melting pot of different things that are provoking this astronomical event on Sargassum. We have to understand that this particular Sargassum that is affecting us, or those two species, which are Sargassum fluitans and Sargassum latans, have a special characteristic in that they are not rooted to the seafloor. There are some species that are rooted and developed on the seafloor, but those two species actually float. They have bladders and they reproduce vegetatively. So once a piece breaks off, it creates a new plant, basically.
Right.
It's all identical to the original one. So the more it breaks up and it disintegrates, is the more it replicates itself and forms new species, new plants. So that is one of the things that is concerning. And if you have a situation, for example, if you have weeds in your garden and you add fertilizer to it.
Yes.
And that is the same thing. We now have these Sargassum species in the ocean, but we are adding fertilizer in terms of nutrients, enabling the environment that encourages their bloom. And that is the conditions that are provoking what we are seeing right now.
So, I mean, you would say, I mean, basically from what you're saying is that this is really us creating the problem. We humans, we people who are living in civilized places and going through development and building and creating all kinds of new stuff, using technology, using new creations. All these things have an impact clearly on what's happening in the ocean in terms of feeding these plants.
Most definitely, the Caribbean and the world by extension, through human activities, are provoking imbalances in nature that we did not previously understand would have happened. We have done a lot of things to the planet that in retrospect we should not have done. The whole issue of climate change and how it is provoked as a result of the increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are some of the things that human beings have provoked. Additionally, in terms of the pollution of our waters and so on, because of how we develop our land space and so on, all these things eventually contribute to some imbalance in nature. And in respect to the Sargassum issue, it's basically a combination of all these different issues creating this monstrosity that is now affecting us, and it will continue to affect us in the Caribbean region in general. There's always Sargassum. If you analyze through the year, although Tobago may not be experiencing beaching of Sargassum, the upper parts of the Caribbean may be experiencing it at a particular time.
Yeah.
So it goes and it varies depending on the weakening or the strength of currents, etc. So basically, it's an entire year period right now. It just happens that would be more affected during a particular part of the year Generally, that starts from about March and it extends sometime the way to September. But the major beachings generally occur between July and August, June, July, and August.
Yeah. So is sargassum, is this dangerous to your skin? Does it cause rash? What's the effect it has physically if people were to wade into the water and mix with it? Is it animals that live in there or the weed itself?
Okay. So the first concern that people should recognize is that you do not know where the Sargassum beaches in your locality originates. You do not know what animal species may be within it. Secondly, sargassum is also a very good absorbent. It absorbs things in its environment very quickly. So therefore, things like heavy metals and other stuff which may be in the water where it's located, it absorbs that and transfers it when it comes. So it's not that we're saying that you cannot be around it, but we just have to understand that we have to be very cautious when approaching it, simply because we do not know what it may contain. And therefore, that is a cause to be very cautious when you're doing anything with sargassum. Even if your intent may be for agricultural uses,
right?
There is the concern, which has been there since about 2015, that sargassum does have at times heavy metals. It doesn't mean that every batch of sargassum that beaches have heavy metals, but tests have proven that it has the ability to absorb heavy metals. And that is not something you want to use as feedstock, neither do you want to transfer it, whether it's by compost or directly, to your crops, which in the end can actually accumulate that in their systems and pass it to others. So that is something of concern as well. Any type of system that wants to use sargassum for agriculture, whether it's for livestock or for fertilizers, etc., has to do the requisite testing, at least samples. Can't test the entire batch, but you have to do at least some sampling to ensure that the product that you're going to generate or the sargassum that you're going to use is actually suitable, and whatever heavy metals that it may contain is below the threshold that is acceptable.
Wow. Hey, you just said something very important, because about 3 months ago, I got some compost, almost manual looking, which was all made from sargassum. I mean, it looks rich, it looks good and all that, but I don't think that they did any testing. I think they just went through the process. So that's a very key thing you're developing there.
Well, we have known that, and even while I was in the environment department, it was always told to anybody trying to use sargassum that is a concern. And because we have known that, we have actually sought to find a partner that we could actually deal with in order to get the requisite testing done.
Right.
Want to roll out such a large scale plan in terms of composting in Tobago. We have received some interested parties, and those things have been passed to the people in the leadership position to consider.
Right.
And I'm sure one of the options will be chosen to ensure that whenever a large scale development in terms of using sargassum is done in Tobago, that all the requisite tests are done to ensure that the safety and the security of the public is primary in our concerns.
Well, I like how the way you couch that, but what do you say about the local farmer who is just going and take some stuff off the beach, came home and did his thing? How do we educate them to?
Well, it's a concern. As I said before, it doesn't mean that every single batch of sargassum beaches has the toxins, but they just have to understand that that is a potential risk, and if they are willing to go through that, then that's up to them. But we have told them previously, and we always educate every time we do anything in terms of sargassum, that is a possibility, but we have no control on preventing people from actually taking sargassum and using it. And as I said, it's most of the tests that have been done have shown that the quantities are not extremely excessive. And cases when testing has been done, no heavy metal have been found. So as we go forward, it will be good to ensure that all requisite testing are done, but we're still trying to identify and to develop that partnership that will allow us to do testing, particularly in areas where we know that excessive amount comes in, and therefore it would be a potential source for using it for composting or in any other area.
So, I mean, in some of the reading, I've seen where people use sargassum because it contains minerals and other valuable resources, and helps people with high blood pressure and diabetes and so on. Do you have any info that lends to that belief?
As I said, there are many sargassum species. So it might not be that the actual species that beaches here is that these people may use. But there has been a lot of studies on these species that identify that they have certain properties that would make them suitable for production in the pharmaceutical industry. So even here in the Caribbean, in Barbados, recently there's a cosmetic line that has been developed based on sargassum. So there is space for research and development.
Right.
Already things that have been done, even within the Caribbean space, that would that go beyond just the basic that we want to do sometimes in agriculture.
Good. So let's swing to tourism. Let's swing to agriculture. Let's swing to fishing. How has sargassum affected these areas? We know that, I know there's a smell associated with sargassum, and that has affected, I know of even being at Blue Waters Inn. I was there one time when that was not a really good experience for any tourist who was coming there. One, they couldn't go in the beach because there was a lot of beach sargassum, and two, the issue of smell. And how are we dealing with those issues in those three areas?
Okay, so in 2016, the Tobago Out of Assembly had decided to develop a emergency sargassum response plan.
Right,
and
yeah, I remember that.
In 2018. And this plan outlines the guidelines in terms of the areas that have been identified as pivotal or have been most impacted, and based on the activities that take place in those areas, recommendations for cleanup actions, etc., have been done. But what we have learned from our experience in 2015, particularly in Speyside and even in the Southwest, is that mechanical intervention is not the most appropriate method for treatment.
Oh, really?
There are many concerns in terms of mechanical intervention. Number one is you're using heavy equipment.
Yes.
And therefore that
backhoe. Yeah.
So these heavy equipment rolling on the beaches compacts the beach, and that is not what you want. Secondly, irrespective of the person who operates the equipment, removing sargassum means that you're also removing significant quantities of sand. And sand is not automatically replaced. It takes time for sand grains to break up from wherever they came from to get to the beach to build up your beach. And if you are repeatedly using heavy equipment, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year on one particular location, there will develop a situation where the rate of removal of sand exceeds the ability of the area to actually place sand on the beach. And the very thing that we are trying to protect, which is the beach, etc., will no longer be there. What you'll have is stones.
Right.
So we recognize that in our attempt to try to treat with the whole issue of the presence of sargassum, that we can be indirectly creating a situation where we accelerate coastal erosion. And for that, we have been very measured since then in the occasions when we have chosen to actually use mechanical intervention. Only at the most critical locations and only at the most critical times, because we want to ensure that we do not, on consecutive basis, go onto a particular beach and remove excessive sand that will make that beach now more prone to coastal erosion. So the recommendation really is for one, manual interventions.
Right.
Continual manual intervention that will ensure that you do not get this continuous build-up over time. But that manual intervention requires a lot of people. It requires a lot of equipment in terms of protective equipment, etc. And that has not been as well developed or implemented as we would hope. But we still recommend that that is the best way to go forward. There will be occasions, for example, there are occasions when you go to bed at night and tomorrow when you get up, the entire beach is covered with so much sargassum that no manual intervention can treat it. And that is a reality. But we also consider on those occasions, what is the tidal phase? How we have a full moon close by where we'll get spring tides, because the natural processes are also capable of removing and burying sargassum. So if we are close to a spring tide, which generally lasts for about a week, we allow natural processes to make the best intervention that is possible. And then we treat with the remaining that is there. For example, a natural process could remove maybe 50 or 60% of the sargassum, and then you could use manual intervention to remove the others. So this is a methodology that we are trying, but we know that it does not always work perfectly as the people in the area would want, but we also want them to understand that if we continually use mechanical intervention on their beaches, the same beaches that they want to see clean and pristine may no longer be
a very important point.
Intervention.
Yeah,
so
very
it has to be
important
a real delicate balance.
Yeah,
that we are walking a very tightrope and we are trying the best as possible. But we monitor other islands and what they do, and we are trying to find the most suitable way to go forward. There's some hope in that we have through TIMA and through the other agency, partner agency in Trinidad, submitted a request through a program that is being developed, I think, by UNDP and Japan, where particular equipment that may help in removing sargassum from the beach, as well as removing sargassum in water, has been requested. Recently, I saw in the news that it was approved, and the islands have received the monies. So hopefully, Tobago will receive its component of that soon. And the reason for the money is to actually procure those equipments. So hopefully those will be something that we'll have maybe next year that we can actually put into effect to help to ameliorate and to reduce the impact of sargassum bleaching on the people that live along the Atlantic coast in Tobago. So
what would be your advice to a tourist who is coming? Because it looks as though this is an inevitable situation that can occur. What would be the kind of education or raising the awareness to visitors during those periods when we're going to have that? I don't know what other islands are doing, but maybe you might be privy to that. How do we tackle that?
There are certain locations based on the size of the beaches where they try to use booms to corner off a section of the beach that will allow the sargassum to stay only in a particular location.
Right.
That is feasible in certain locations in Tobago, but generally the beaches that are being affected are extremely wide beaches.
Yes.
Therefore, trying to corner off one particular location, particularly based on the wind direction, is not always a feasible option. But that is something that can be considered. The other thing is that based on the quantity of sargassum that is in the water, you shouldn't go with it.
Okay. It's a no-no.
Right. Based on the quantity of sargassum, you shouldn't be. I sometimes do beach profiling, and if I go in the water without like a thick suit or something, it irritates, it itches my.
Yes.
because I do not know exactly what
What's
is.
in it? Yeah.
So I wouldn't advise somebody that doesn't have that protective gear on them to actually wade into the sargassum unnecessary. The positive thing is that sargassum does not affect at this time the entire coast of Tobago.
Right.
It particularly affects the Atlantic coast.
Atlantic side, yes.
So
Right.
there is still possibility to explore other beaches in other locations during those periods.
Yeah.
But it would be also good if we could find ways where we could at least find certain segments that we could corner up that would afford people the opportunity to use the locations that they paid for. Because when you look at a brochure or something of a particular location, one of the things that you come for is the ability to be in very close proximity.
That's right. That's right.
So that is something that has to be weighed as well and considered in terms of the way going forward in trying to find solutions, at least for segments of the beach, to ensure that people can still participate in the activities that they want.
And how do we deal with fishermen? How do they deal with that? Because I'm assuming that this may create problems for engines or pathways in the ocean and so on. How do we deal with that?
Okay, so for the fishermen, it's a good and bad. Bad in too much sargassum when they pack their boats or when they want to come ashore, clogs their engines.
Yes.
So that is not good for them at all. However, the sargassum out in the areas where they fish also attracts species of fish that ensure that they have a greater catch.
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword for the fish. And they do recognize the pros and the cons of having it, but I know for sure they would want to be able to freely exit the areas where they have and come back to shore to be able to ply the trade without any sort of inconvenience or reservation. But the blocking of their passages is not just limited to the fishermen. The port at Scarborough at times have situations where sargassum is in the water and the boats, the ferries do not want into it to clog their engines either.
Right.
So, on those occasions, we actually use, through TEMA, another boat to actually try to push the sargassum further.
Okay. That's important. That's important.
Because the natural drift generally is in a westward direction. So we try to just push it using a boat, and that will ensure that it clears a path so that the ferries, they can
move. Right.
And exit.
Right. So I mean, we've seen what this can do to transport, to agriculture, tourism, and fishing. What is the wind side of this all? What are the industries? Because I read that Grenada, some people are doing things with the sargassum. We know Barbados. So what are some of the industries that you know of in the Caribbean or in TNT, I don't know, that are making use of this unfortunate event and literally creating industry from it?
Okay. I think the one that first blossomed in the Caribbean and is more well known is the use of sargassum in to make liquid fertilizer.
Right. Yes.
In St. Lucia, that is being done by I think the company is called Algas Organics or something of that sort, and they have been rather productive in that particular regard. I will presume as well that when they develop their product, that they also do testing in respect to
and do the quality control and all that.
The heavy metals. As I said, indicated before, in Barbados, you have a line of skincare products that have been done. Even here in UWE in Trinidad, there have been research and development into the production of bioplastic from sargassum that could be used as an alternative to the plastic bottles that we have. So environmentally friendly options that are being explored even within the space of Trinidad and Tobago. The composting is something that is feasible as well, but it has to be feasible within the context of doing the correct checks and balances to ensure that whatever product you do is going to be something that does not negatively impact the population. And last recent, the division of infrastructure, quarries, and urban development actually partnered with a company, a local company that is into recycling, headed by Mr. Sean Roberts, where the intent is to actually do composting. And it is for that reason that we have been actively seeking to procure the services of a lab that will ensure that the quality control associated with that is done properly, and we have a product that is good for the consumption or the use in agriculture in Tobago. So those are some of the things that are going on. In Barbados as well, I think I read recently that there's a company that is interested in making biogas or experimenting in biogas using the sargassum and the water waste from distilleries to produce biogas that can be used as an alternative fuel. But in all these cases, I have itemized. What is interesting is that it is private parties seeing opportunities that are available and trying to make investments to develop them.
Yes,
I know that in Tobago, a lot of emphasis is placed on the THE and what it can do. It's also an opportunity here for chemists and other people who are inclined in that area. So what possibilities may be available for developing products from Sargassum that could be sold for a profit, and a potentially negative situation can be turned around into something that is positive and can be monetized.
A whole brand new line of entrepreneurship there. And the possibilities seem really, really endless there. The issue of coast in Tobago is always one that intrigues me, because I used to be at Shaw Park, as you know, with the complex. I was there from since it was an idea and a slab. And I recall when they were building that it was supposed to be an X amount of piles. And when they started, they realized from all the tests that they did, they actually ended up putting at least 40% more piles into the ground. And the reason being was to really try and control any idea of shifting. However, I know that we did see that the whole where the drains were and the canals, over the 5 years, the first 5 years, we were able to see that shifting and actually dropping. And I know the attention was focused on how the kind of work to go in, whether it be with baskets or stones or what have you. And a lot of work was done by some of your own colleagues and so on to address that. But I know that whole line on that side where we lost Robinson Crusoe, the hotel. And then we, of course, right now, Scarborough Sec, as you know, there's talk about building a new Scarborough Sec, because we have lost a lot of land on the back there and so on. How is that whole issue of the coast and dealing with the coastline being addressed?
Okay, so in Tobago, there are many areas that have been affected by coastal erosion. That is true. One of the most difficult decisions I think that any government has to make in terms of coastal management is the fact that there is a time when we might have to consider retreat, because the quantum of investment that is required in a particular location might exceed what is really available at the particular time. Particularly in the coastline that you made reference to. We in the Coastal Zone Management Unit have recommended the need for significant studies in that location to understand exactly what is taking place. Because if you are not guided by science by evidence that helps you to design the most appropriate structures, then you might be making investments now that you'll have to modify and reinvest in the future.
Granted.
I think the government at present recognizes the need to be cautious in how they move forward in terms of allocation. And that may have been the reason why they decided not to reconstruct the school in that particular
right.
To move it to somewhere else. And these are some of the hard decisions that may have to be taken in respect to the entire situation of climate change, coastal erosion, and sea level rise. But it's something that will have to be considered. It's something
right.
Maybe a more long-term solution. But these are some of the discussions that really need to be had with the populace so that they could understand the situation that is being faced, not just here only in Tobago, but basically on a global scale in respect to sea level rise and coastal erosion.
Robin, I have to tell you that what you just said is probably one of the most critical statements you probably made during this whole interview. And I will tell you why. I think it is so important to talk at this level, to educate and raise, as I said, pure awareness of some of these facts so that they pretty much, what I want to find out, because you are part of a climate change coastal team. And I would imagine that the work, so far you're sounding pretty robust. That work entails what basically around the island?
Okay, so the coastal zone management units basically are responsible for managing the impacts of and mitigating the impacts of coastal erosion in Tobago. One of the basic things that we do is collect beach profiling data, where we go out on a quarterly basis in partnership with the Institute of Marine Affairs to collect information as to locations where beaches may be eroding and accreting or in dynamic equilibrium. One of the things that we do. So we have some information in terms of some of the areas experiencing coastal erosion in Tobago. We are also responsible for executing projects in terms of building revetments along the coast to ensure that particular locations are protected because of important infrastructure, etc. So some of those things we are into. But at present, we are still a small unit, and even today in the budget presentation, reference was made to expanding the portfolio of that unit and increasing the personnel in that unit to ensure that we can better treat with the whole situation of coastal erosion in Tobago. That is something to look forward to, but at present, with our staff, limited though it may be, we are trying our best to at certain times outsource the gathering of information to companies that would better be able to advise us to do projects. So a classic example is the situation at Pigeon Point, where we have contracted a firm through the division to do the necessary research and the documentation of what they are observing to present potential solution for that entire space. Because one of the things that can cause significant destruction along coastlines is small-scale interventions along the coast. The coast is a dynamic whole.
Yes, I got you. A whole.
They are integrated parts. And if you do something in one particular location,
it's going to shift the other,
along the rest of the coastline.
Yes.
In the case of Pigeon Point, Milford, the evaluation is for the entire location to ensure that whenever recommendations are done, even though it's staged, it takes into consideration the entire area and will not have any negative repercussions on the adjacent areas along the coast.
So is there like an overall policy that guides everything so that it becomes a sustainable set of actions that maintains itself for years? Is there like a set policy and this is what the direction we're heading?
We do not have exactly at present a overarching set policy that is still to be developed.
All right, okay.
But what we have been following are the best practices in terms of international practices,
Okay.
as well as the present ICZM.
Yeah.
That policy, which has been forming for a while, has not been actually authenticated or hasn't been presented properly as a national policy, but it's something that is documented, and we have been following some of the principles that are in that document to ensure that we, even though we do not have a robust policy as yet, at least we are following the best practices and principles available at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that is so critical. You know, last night I was part of a focus group at UE discussing the thing about museums, right? And the fact about museums as community museums, and why do we need museum, and why do we need to start looking at museum? If you got $2 million, what would be the first kind of museum you do for Tobago? And through it all, we were in that discussion, because it wasn't only for Tobago and Trinidad, it was for the whole Caribbean, because they're trying to create, again, policy about how we address this thing about museums. And I say that in the context of one of the first things is really about how we educate young people as part of the start, the children, the kindergarten. And I was thinking, as you were talking, I would think that even in terms of care for your island, care for your coast, care and understanding those same things you talk about today, and to make it sustainable, maybe one of the things we have to look at is how we create the kind of programs for educating the young. Any thoughts on that?
Definitely. Particularly the environment unit has been trying to do some of those things in terms of having programs in the school or linking with the schools to help them understand what is taking place, not just along the coastline, but in the general environment of Tobago. It has been hindered in respect to COVID, that for sure.
Yes.
It's something that we have continued to do. We partner with other agencies that do education. So, for example, Buku Reef Trust and other areas which run programs over the summer. The Coastal Zone Management Unit, as well as people from the Department of the Environment, do go or they stay online and try to help in building a better understanding of what is taking place in and around Tobago in terms of its environment. So that is being done, but there is still more that can be done in order to continue to educate children from as small an age as possible, throughout high school and through college, so that they can have a better understanding of the environment, and most importantly, have that consciousness that allows them to make the changes that are necessary for them to survive within this environment.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of critical. Sorry to belabor the point, but you know, in Japan, I was looking at a documentary recently, and what they were showing you was that these children, they teach them from very early how they say thank you when they cross the road. In the schools, they do all the serving to the other children. They teach them teamwork, they teach them responsibility, they clean up, they scrub the floor, they do. I mean, it's just an amazing thing of how they do that as a way of inculcating certain values and certain kind of norms for the society. If you have the whole society bubbling like that. Lastly, so I'm working at festivals, and one of the things that I'm very, very, very conscious about, having traveled and seen it, is this thing about environment and the key point it plays in terms of green festivals, of trying to keep festivals appreciative of environment. And I'm kind of glad you spoke a while ago about Pigeon Point, because a number of our festivals are hosted there. And so, I mean, just give me a little bit, how can we find the ways of synergies and collaboration that would allow us to all be talking from the same page and singing in the same key?
So the environment, particularly Tobago's environment, is one of the key attractions for tourists.
Right.
Is the Mill Forest. That is a key attraction. Therefore, partnerships between all the agencies in terms of protecting the environment, but also creating greater awareness of the environment is key. There are synergies that can be had between environment and tourism, between environment and culture. All these are things that can be explored and utilized as a platform to have an integrated appeal for the tourism product in Tobago. I think that the man and the biosphere designation in the north of the island, or the northeast of the island, has that potential as well, and it as well was referred to in the budget today. So I think Tobago is on the right track in terms of promoting its natural space, and it will be good to see how synergies can be developed in the different divisions in Tobago that will identify or promote this local space or this local natural environments to ensure that people are attracted to Tobago. There are millions of tourists over the world, but there are people who are specifically interested in seeing what you have to offer from an environmental basis, natural things, and they will pay good money to come and see it. So if Tobago can promote that more, and if we as a people living here can help to protect it, therefore to ensure that when they come, they observe an area that is pristine, an area that is green, an area that is serene. If we do that, definitely you'll be able to market this island as one of the best destinations to choose to come for your vacation.
Howard, you could not have said it better than him. I mean, you've said it all there. And I'm going to be a little unusual because I normally would start, but I'm going to end. The fact that you studied in Cuba, I'm very interested in that because I've gone to Cuba a few times on cultural missions. And I think that is one of the most fascinating places on the planet. So how was it studying there?
The first year was a bit challenging to adjust to the culture and the way that they behave and how they operate. But after you get a better understanding and a better knowledge, particularly in terms of the language, living in Cuba basically becomes easy. I would not trade my experiences there for anything. Yeah. I spent the better part of my young life from 20 to 26 there. And it taught me to be resilient. It taught me to be strong. And it also expanded my understanding of people.
Yes.
Living on a small island like Dominica, you generally only understand your local culture.
Yes, yes.
But you got to interact with children and students from all over the Caribbean and all over the world. And that gave you a better perspective in terms of how to interact and how to socialize with people. And in terms of their discipline and their dedication, function.
Commitment, boy.
Most resilient and creative people that I have ever come across.
Yes.
If all the Caribbean could have that degree of resilience and creativity, we would move the entire world. So
definitely. I mean, I could
the situation is different from us, but through their situation, they have found ways to adjust and to ensure that they continue to live the best life possible.
Yes. And then I see that you went to UE. Which did you go, Mona? Cave Hill?
I went to Cave Hill.
Oh, you went to Cave Hill. Okay.
Cave Hill.
Well, you missed St. Augustine. Okay, all right.
St. Augustine at that time wasn't offering what I wanted.
What you were doing, yes. And then I know you told me you taught a little bit in Tobago. Yeah. You even taught at Scarborough Sec too.
Yeah, I taught environmental sciences at Scarborough Sec, but before that, I taught about 7 years between Dominica and the BVI.
Okay.
So
Good.
I taught there for some time. So I have been in different Caribbean countries. All of them have something that is distinct and beautiful about them.
Yes, yes.
Helped me to get a better understanding of
Yes,
Caribbean peoples and what we appreciate and
yes, yes, yes. Well, Howard, I want to thank you very much for being part of Tobago Connect. And, you know, here's this program. We really try to raise some of the awareness of some of the issues right here in Tobago that speak to development and sustainability. And so it's environment and culture and entrepreneurship and so on. And I heard you're like the guru. So that's what
that
they
may
told
not
me,
be
you know.
exactly true, but
If you want to talk about sarcasm, you have to go to the guru. But I mean, no, I mean, from the evidence here today, certainly of yours would certainly have learned a whole heap. And I want to thank you very much for being able to articulate so well and sharing the information. And again, Tobago Connect, looking forward to seeing you next week. And on the next program of Tobago Connect, I'm JQ. See you next week.
okay, thanks again for having me.